Nobody could have access to the data. So I got so annoyed that I published it in my book. And by the way, if you think we have free speech in this country, guess again. No publisher would publish this book because they were afraid they would get sued by Exxon. I mortgaged my home to publish this book because I thought the information was so critical. So of course nobody's going to read a 600-page book until now, right? You guys all need it now. But the rest of the story is I actually had my phone tapped twice, and I've been thrown in jail once over uncovering the sick workers. This is, and I found out, it was the oil industry, we found out one phone tap. I've actually been in congressional hearings over a covert surveillance operation, and I had to do a invasion of privacy lawsuit against 7 big oil companies and Wackenhut. Who did BP hire for security? Wackenhut. Wackenhut spies. You know, if your phone starts acting like Rice Krispies with milk poured on it, just say, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. You're not doing anything illegal. But so what did Exxon do after it knew people were getting sick, and after it knew why people were getting sick, because it had the air quality monitoring data? Ready for this? Exxon put out a partial release form indemnifying itself from future lawsuits for toxic torts. Didn't tell the workers. Told all the workers this stuff was as safe as pancakes here. Sign this form, we'll pay you $600 and 50 cents. The 50 cents was so it had to be reported on a W-2 form. So if you did file a lawsuit, that they could have a record that you signed this waiver and you can't file a lawsuit. This is what you're dealing with here. And I'm sorry to say, it's apparently BP has learned a lot from Exxon. This is much more aggressive attempts by BP to control the images and the evidence than what I saw with Exxon Valdez. And I thought that was bad. Okay? This is way, way worse. We have actually caught some interesting dumpster activities on camera. Okay, so what we did not have in Exxon Valdez was public health threat, so much as what you have here. Our beaches were remote, nobody's living on them, hardly. I mean, we have a couple of villages here and there. 22 communities were oiled in a 3,200 miles of coastline that got oiled. If you had 3,000 miles of coastline oil, it would be more than 22 communities, right? So, and also it probably was a public health problem, but I certainly wasn't aware of it. I was focused on fishing claims, the ecosystem, that. It wasn't until I wrote this that sick people, sick wildlife, hey, we got a problem. So, when I first, and I'm working up to hurricanes here, when I first went down to Venice and met the fishermen, I immediately started hearing stories of headaches, dizziness, nausea. And I'm going, oh no, you know, they're giving you guys hard hats, just like they did with us, not respiratory. So, I shared stories from this book. I read what the medical doctors were saying, you know, dizziness, nausea, headaches. It's central nervous system problem. This is a hallmark symptom of overexposure to crude oil. It just flat is in the material safety data sheets. Fishermen said, what can we do? I said, well, ask BP for respirators. They did. BP said no. BP said they weren't required. So we're not going to use them. So, Tracy's not here. Tracy had to leave. I was traveling with a person from Louisiana, bayou keeper, her husband is a fisherman. So they raised money. They got money for respirators, bought respirators, gave them to their husbands, their sons, who showed up, and BP said, if you wear that, we will terminate your job. That's great. I'm not kidding, and here's what I'm thinking, because this is so aggressive, what's going on now. The oil industry as a whole wants to stay in the oil business. They've already got one huge strike against it, which is the climate crisis. Burning of fossil fuels contributes. And I know it looks a lot different down here than it looks up in Alaska. We're already having to evacuate communities because the sea ice is forming. There's less of it. It forms differently. Our coasts are getting hammered. Native indigenous communities that have been on the same community inhabited land for 10,000 years are having to evacuate. So we're already getting the front edge of this. I think down here you're seeing it in hurricane intensity and frequency. But the point is, the oil companies don't want another strike against oil. And oil is declared, it's a hazardous waste cleanup, which means it becomes a hazardous waste after it spills. And this was because the labor union, AFL-CIO, and the International Labor Union of North America lobbied hard for years to get oil spills declared hazardous because they needed more protection. When they went out, their workers were getting sick. 2 weeks before Exxon Valdez, oil spills became a hazardous waste, recognized as a hazardous waste cleanup. Why is oil not hazardous before it spills, and then when it spills, it's hazardous? Does that make any sense? No. And it's because the oil companies don't want oil declared a hazardous substance. We use it, we've gotten so used to it, but really, this stuff is hazardous. So, our workers, so I don't think the industry wants the stigma of respirators. It just sets a bad precedent, and it also makes the industry accountable for the people long-term health monitoring for hazardous waste. All right? So, fishermen came back and said, now what do we do? And I said, okay, this is a bigger problem. So, got on the phone with OSHA, made some phone calls, everything looked okay until OSHA came out and said, do you guys follow that? Oh, respirators are not required. That's what OSHA says, the head of OSHA. So, wrote a little letter to the Department of Labor and said, really, what did you that letter is on my website, rikiott.com. There's a bunch of good stuff on there, by the way, including postings from fishermen down in Louisiana, what they're up against. So you should check that out. But I posted that letter there, and I said, here's 10 questions. What did you base your decision on not to require respirators? And I just outlined all the ways the worker safety program could go wrong. Where's your data for this? Did you monitor this? What labs monitored it? So a week, and I gave them a week to respond, and a week later, OSHA has flipped from the 4-hour alleged safety training to 40 hours, which includes training for respirators. So now respirators are going to be required because OSHA had no basis to make that decision. And when they got called on it, they folded, okay? So that's like the bit of good news. Now, the bad news is all you guys have beards. Oh, see, you don't have beards so much. In Alaska, every fisherman has a beard. They got to go. You can't have a respirator with a beard.
Temperature difference.
Yeah. Okay, I buy that. Man, nobody's seen me in a skirt in Alaska, ever. Okay? Oh, God, I mean, seriously. Jeez. Okay, so weeks pass, and then I'm not just hearing stories of people offshore getting sick. Now I'm starting to hear stories of people onshore getting sick. And it's people who, your beaches have houses all along the beaches.
Yeah.
So these are people that walk along the beaches, that, just residents, and people, wives who are at home, not out fishing necessarily, not out working on the oil spill response. And they're exact same symptoms. Headaches, nausea, dizziness, throwing up, skin rashes, blisters on your feet from walking on the beaches. And I'll be darned if Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi aren't all downplaying this because we want tourism. And I cannot believe what I'm seeing on the beaches where I go, and there's oil spill people in semi-hazmat suits where where the cameras are, they dress people differently. That's a real good thing to notice. BP puts people in hazmat suits on the beaches where there's people taking pictures. And I've seen tourists sunning themselves who are hazmat crew. This is like not making sense. Okay, so there's 5 forms of oil that are coming ashore. At least there, not here so much yet, but this is what to watch out for. Okay, the front runner kind of are those hard tar asphalt things. That's left over from the burn. Those you can pick up with a kitty litter scoop, not so bad. Then there's the mousse. As Tracy says, it looks like if you're running a boat and you get water in your oil, it turns that kind of chocolate milkshake thing. That's the mousse. And it's dispersed, unfortunately. I forgot to talk about dispersants. And this stuff, if you get it on you, it'll be skin rash. But and if the waves whip it into the